and my name's Larry Kiley.
Paul Hunter, Larry?
Paul Hunter.
Right.
And Paul, I think just prior to this, we talked a little bit about some of your family here, and one of your cousins is a friend of mine also, and I didn't realize that. We work together with the FRA. Mm-hmm. Paul, we're here today to talk to you about your experiences in World War II. Yes. And what you did, where you went to boot camp. Anything in particular that stands out in your mind that you would like to put on film for history that we can talk about it? And I'm just going to start it off with, where'd you go to boot camp at?
At Kearns, Utah, which is near Salt Lake City.
And how long were you there?
13 days.
13 days.
Can you imagine how much basic training I got?
That was basic training?
That was it.
That was it. Where did you go from there?
To airplane mechanics school at Lincoln, Nebraska.
Okay, at Lincoln, they had an Army Air Force base there.
Yes. It was an airplane mechanics school.
And were they reciprocating engines of all kinds, or just all kinds of mechanics?
Actually, it was a pursuit airplane school, which is a far cry from heavy bombers. But the engine principles, of course, were the same.
Mm-hmm. Well, after you graduated school in Lincoln, where did you go from there?
At that time, they were taking a few graduates from that school and sending to cadet school to become engineering officers in the Air Corps. And I qualified and went to Boca Raton, Florida for basic training. Then I got basic training.
After you'd been to basic training and went to school, and then went to basic training again.
Right.
It's amazing the way that the military worked back then, and you and I talked about that a little bit before we came on the camera. And I think we kind of come to the conclusion that it was amazing that anybody, or as many, came back as did.
Right.
Well, after Boca Raton, where did you go from there?
Well, that was cadet basic. The cadet training then was at Yale University at New Haven, Connecticut. And actually I was there for 8 weeks, commissioned second lieutenant.
And from second lieutenant and Yale University, where did you proceed to then?
A few went through some tests and asked for B-29 training. And we went from there to Seattle, Washington, to the Boeing plant and studied the B-29 airplane. Our instructors were all B-29 or Boeing employees that had worked on design of the B-29. And we spent 10 weeks there in that school.
After that school in Seattle, you were actually working in a secure area, which was Boeing at that time during the war years, but yet it was a civilian secured area, wasn't it? I mean, it wasn't a military base.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. In fact, they had no accommodations to house or feed us. A friend and I had a room in a private home and ate all our meals in cafes.
From Seattle and Boeing, where did you go?
To Salina, Kansas, to Flight Engineers School, which was an Air Corps school. And I got detained by breaking an ankle and held up for a while. In the meantime, the school moved to Lowry Field at Denver. So I finished Flight Engineers School at Lowry Field at Denver.
What was Salina base called at that time?
Smoky Hill.
Smoky Hill.
Right.
And later become a different name that the Air Force later, didn't they rename it something else? later in the years?
I think they did, and I can't recall.
You know,
what it was.
I'm like you, I can't either, but it seems like they named it something else. So you went to Lowry in Denver
Mhm.
and continued your flight engineer school.
Right.
And then from Lowry, where did you proceed?
Then it was to Pratt, to assignment to the 40th Bomb Group.
And the 40th Bomb Group, at that time, was homed at Pratt then?
Yes, yes. That was December 43. The 40th Bomb Group actually had been here since about July or August, I think. I was one of the last flying personnel to be assigned to the group, I think.
When you came to Pratt, how were living conditions at the base and that type of thing at that?
Well, better than some I'd been in and not as good as others. It was no Yale University, I'll tell you for sure.
Did you live?
I lived in the bachelor officers' quarters, which were tar paper shacks, but they were divided into rooms, and 2 officers to a room.
And there was a lot of officers at that time lived off base too, wasn't there?
Yes. All of them who had wives or family with them certainly tried to live off base. But most of us who were still single lived on base.
A little side note to that, my grandmother and grandfather during the war years lived at Oak and School Street up here, and they had some of those folks living with them. They rented the basement. They had it divided in half, and an officer on each side and his wife, and another officer and his wife on the other side. And then upstairs they rented a room to a sergeant and his wife. So they had a full complement there. Well, after you were at Pratt, or while you were at Pratt, was there anything that you remember specifically, or any people that you remember meeting here that have stuck out in your mind through the years?
Really, there were not. Excuse me. I didn't spend much time in town. Got over to Wichita a few weekends, that sort of thing. But I didn't make many acquaintances in the town. Made some friends on the base, certainly, that are still my friends.
I was going to say, is there any of those people at the base that you met that you recall and stick out in your mind?
Yes. In fact, I still am in contact with a few of them.
You were here some weeks ago when Colonel Morgan was here.
Yes.
And did you know Colonel Morgan at that time
No.
at Pratt when he was here?
I understand that he was here before the 40th moved out, but I didn't know him at that time.
Did you ever have the opportunity to meet General, at that time, Colonel Tibbets?
No, I did not.
Didn't meet him either, and understand that both of those gentlemen were here
Yes.
during that period of time in history. From Pratt, you received your training, and you were telling me you were a flight engineer, and you were telling me about the B-29 engines, that they were untried.
Yes, they were. They were an untested engine when we got them. And when we moved over, after we moved overseas, we lost more men and more airplanes to engine failure than we ever did to enemy action.
And that's amazing. That's amazing. Did the engine, as the years and months progressed, did the engine become a better engine, or did they redesign, re-engine the aircrafts, or?
They did make some changes, and the changes came as a result of the reports that we sent in, unsatisfactory reports on engine failures. There were a few cylinders on each engine that ran hotter than the rest, and the valves in those cylinders burned out. They changed the oiling system a little, which put some crossover tubes, they called them, on the engines probably cost about $20 an engine, and surely at least double the life that we were getting out of those. Surely at least double the life that we were getting out of those engines.
And would it have been some of those engines with hot cylinders that could have caused planes to go down
Yes.
in those days? So for $20, you know, it was costing people's lives.
It was.
And that's a terrible price to pay.
Yes.
When you were overseas, where did you go from Pratt with Warrior?
We moved to a base at Chakulia, India, which was about 80 miles west of Calcutta.
And where were your missions that you flew out of Calcutta? Basically Calcutta.
Yeah, from that area, any target that needed to be hit down the Malay Peninsula as far as Singapore. Singapore was maximum range, or considered maximum range, and those missions took 18 hours or so round trip.
And that was on one tank of gas.
Right, one fill up, and no filling stations in between. There was one longer mission flown from Ceylon, which is now Sri Lanka, to the oil refineries at Palembang, Sumatra, and that was about 20 hours flight.
And that was pushing it.
It pushed it very hard, yes.
Is there anything in those missions that you recall that stick out in your mind that were more harrowing than others? I realize that probably all missions were harrowing from the time you took off until you landed.
Well, a few, yes. The first one really was not a combat mission. The supply situation was such when we got overseas that we had to make a lot of trips over the hump to our advanced base in China, hauling our own supplies. The Air Transport Command simply couldn't keep up with the need for our supplies for us in China. And on one of those trips, we crash landed a plane in the town of Xizang, China, which is deep down in the mountains. Supposedly they had a 5,000-foot runway, but it was under construction. We found out when it was too late to do anything but land. When the nose wheel hit the area where they were working on the runway, it collapsed. The nose went down into rough rubble rocks and pretty well ground it up. Nobody was hurt. They sent, we were there about a week, and till C-46 airplane could come in and get us. They sent a crew up there to try to salvage the plane. They were there about 90 days and gave it up. The intention was to replace the entire nose section, everything from the front bomb bay forward. The problem was there was no way to get a new nose section up there.
Mm. So it was a logistics problem with transportation of the part.
That's right.
The reason they couldn't get the airplane.
That's
right. The runway that was being built there, was that being built by Americans, or was that being built by
the Chinese?
By the Chinese?
Yes. And the sad part of it was that when our nose wheel collapsed, where the Chinese were working there on the airplane, on the runway, they thought we were going to turn, they said, and didn't get out of the way, and killed 9 of them.
Killed 9?
Yes.
No, that's terrible. That is terrible. So that would be a harrowing experience that you would recall and not forget that, I'm sure. Combat missions.
Well, 2 stand out. One was to Singapore, one of those long-range missions. We were shot up pretty badly over the target. The radio man lost an eye. Nobody else was hurt. But for various reasons, we couldn't make it all the way back to India. We landed at Akyab Island, which is in the Bay of Bengal. The British had taken it back from the Japs about 30 days before we landed there. We landed there, they flew down the parts that we needed to, and the British loaned us enough reverse lend-lease gasoline to get back to India. And I think about 3 days later, we finished the flight back to India.
You got that plane back there?
Yes.
In good shape then?
Yes, it was repairable. It was repaired and flew combat after that.
You know, you talk about the lend-lease thing and gasoline. I wonder if they've ever squared the books up yet.
I think we came out a little short on that one. Then after we moved to Tinian Island in April of '45, the first mission we flew, we were shot up pretty badly. Nobody was hurt on that one, but I'm forever grateful to the Marines who took Iwo Jima, because we would never have made it back had we not been able to land at Iwo Jima that day.
So you were one of those planes that needed a home, and Iwo Jima was it.
That's right.
And many stories, as you have just related, from B-29 pilots, that they thank God for Iwo Jima and the Marines.
Yes. Because
it was safe haven.
I think I've seen the number about 2,400 flights, B-29s landed there
that would never have made it back.
That's right. Well, some of them might have, but a lot of them would have been in the ocean if Iwo Jima hadn't been available to land on.
And pushing their luck.
Right.
How many combat missions out of the Chinese sector over there did you fly?
About half of the required 35 missions.
And then how many did you fly in out of Tinian?
The other.
Well, Paul, we had a little technical difficulty there, but being the old flight engineer you were, you got to figure it out. So we were talking about we were discussing missions, and that you had 35 missions.
Right.
And at the end of those 35 missions, were you did you fly back in your own B-29, or did they rotate you back in a transport plane, or how did that happen?
Well, that was another little long story. We didn't finish as a crew. I'd been assigned to 6 or 8 different crews among those 35 missions, and actually flew as a substitute on my mission number 35. But when that was done, then as soon as the orders were cut, I flew transport to down to Guam, and air transport from there to Hawaii, Liberty ship from Hawaii to Seattle. And we were 2 days short of Seattle when the war ended.
So you were on your way back.
Right.
Did you know the war had ended? Did you get that word on the ship?
Oh, yes. Yes, the communications came through.
So you knew when you got here that it was all over, that
Right.
you wasn't going to be here for a time and going back.
Right. And of course, we landed in Seattle. The previous day had been a day off for everybody to celebrate the end of the war, and the whole town was sleeping it off the next day. So we missed the celebration.
Did I would assume that the adult beverage companies did well that day.
I think they did, yeah.
When you were flying B-29s, was there any crew that you flew with more than others?
Yes, about the last half of my combat time, except for the last mission. I flew with one crew.
You remember the name of the plane?
And I'm not even sure that the one had assigned to us had a name. But it didn't, we outlasted it. It didn't fly any more combat after that first mission off Tinian.
Mm-hmm.
They repaired it, but used it for a radar countermeasures plane after that.
It was shot up that bad that they
Yes.
they didn't try to use it for a bombardment aircraft
That's right.
platform.
That's right.
The war's over, and you come back. We're into Seattle.
Into Seattle, yes.
Okay.
And then by train to Denver, to Camp Carson.
Yeah,
I
Colorado
believe-
Springs,
Uh,
Camp Carson.
No, it's nearer Denver.
Mm.
I'm-
I don't know what that was.
My-
Peterson Field is,
my-
no, that's at, that was at Colorado Springs also. Lowry was the only thing I knew at Denver.
Well, we weren't at Lowry, we were at an Army base, and granted leave from there, which was 30 days and stretched into 45, and then went to Santa Ana, California for separation.
Separated back in California.
Yes.
Came back to, where was home?
The farm in Labette County, Kansas.
In Labette County.
Right.
Now, is that down where you live now in Parsons?
Yes.
In the same area?
Yes.
Same farm?
No, not the same farm, but the farm where my wife and I have lived for 53 years is just a mile from where I grew up.
Now, during World War II, you had a connection with Pratt because
Right.
you came here to train in B-29s.
Yes,
You also have a connection with Pratt here now.
yes, I do.
With the matter of fact, this institution we're in here right now.
Yes.
And who's that?
My son Bill has been on the faculty here for, I think he's in his 10th year now.
And he's a what?
He's a PhD and heads the ag department.
And he's a very nice man too. I know your son, and we visit from time to time.
Thank you.
He's a wonderful fellow. We won't go into what PhD is. You and I discussed that earlier.
Yes.
We'll leave it at his academic level and leave it there. Paul, is there anything else that you'd like to tell on tape that comes to mind that we didn't cover that maybe you'd like to talk about?
The past 22 years, 40th Bomb Group has been having annual reunions that I think I've attended 20 of the 23 reunions we've had. Enjoyed them very much, renewing acquaintances with people I knew then. And I look forward to them every year. They're a wonderful bunch of people. We all know that we're very fortunate to have survived the war and to have lived now, almost all of us, into our 80s and still be able to get out and go to a reunion.
That's wonderful. And, you touched a point there that I heard Hap Halloran talking this morning to another gentleman, and he called him a war hero. And he says, no, I'm not a war hero, I'm a survivor.
That's right.
And I think that's the way a lot of you fellows felt too. There's none of us heroes, we were survivors.
Yes. That's the way I always felt about it. I had my younger daughter's a newspaper editor. She did an editorial at 50 years past Pearl Harbor, mostly on my experiences. And she said, you say you weren't heroes, but you were ordinary people thrust into extraordinary circumstances, and you did your duty.
And to that, I would say, many accolades to that statement because it's very true. And And to people like myself, and there's others in this room here that feel the same way, to us, all of you fellas that were over there, men and women that were engaged in this, are heroes. And because if you weren't doing that extraordinary thing, we would be speaking some other language. And we wouldn't be enjoying the freedoms that we still enjoy today.
Very possible.
And Paul, I thank you for your time, sharing your experiences, and looking forward to seeing you again many times. And
I hope so.
I hope you have a good reunion next time you go down with the 40th Bomb Group. When is it?
Next September in Providence, Rhode Island.
You'll be there.
Sure plan to be.
Thanks a lot.